Welcome to Independent RX Forum with the National Community Pharmacists Association, America's leading advocate and business education provider for independent community pharmacists. Independent RX Forum is powered by RX Connection.
Good morning, everybody. We are here on the Independent RX Forum. My name is Kaite Krell. I am the Director of Congressional Affairs here at NCPA, and I am here with Micah Lansford, who is with Roden-Smith Pharmacy out of Clovis, New Mexico, who I am so excited got to come up and testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Personnel Subcommittee, on a special hearing on Tricare in the pharmacy network, and explain a little bit more about how he was impacted, his patients were impacted, what's going on. It was a great hearing. We had a representative from the Defense Health Administration. We had the head of Express Scripts. We also had Greg Raybold, who was there to talk a little bit more about the contracts that pharmacies are put into that we've worked with over the years. And so it was a really excellent hearing, I thought, on my end. And Micah, do you want to talk a little bit about your story, how you felt that it went? Yeah, how was yesterday for you?
Yeah, it was a exciting opportunity. One that, was nerve-wracking to be a part of, but given the opportunity to participate in something like that, it's really hard to not say yes to it. So, a lot of preparation, a lot of help from American Pharmacies and NCPA and a bunch of other groups, PUT, to prepare me to say and be a good representation for independent pharmacy.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it.
You did an excellent job. We were hearing from committee afterwards and folks who'd watched it who really appreciated your testimony and thought it was great. I thought it was wonderful. Do you want to share a little bit more with our audience here what you talked about, what you thought was important to put into your testimony, and just kind of how any of the back and forth that you had when you were up on the dais went?
Yeah. There's so much information. And that was one of the most difficult things was how do we condense this in a digestible format for the committee members? It's tough enough whenever we're just trying to explain these problems and concepts to our peers and our friends, what's happening in the pharmacy. But to reduce it into a clear written testimony and then into an even smaller verbal testimony was tough. I wanted to highlight the discrepancy on reimbursement. And you can only explain drug versus other costs so much. But we went back and looked at all the data that we had from our last year of participating in the Tricare contract and found that on average we were losing 37 cents on every prescription we filled. And then the upcoming contract would have been just impossible to be a part of. And I know that was true for about 13,000 pharmacies. It would have been even more difficult for us because of how many Tricare beneficiaries we have the opportunity to serve.
Yeah.
I know that, I would speculate that a lot of the people that did say yes to the contract maybe didn't have to worry about filling many of those prescriptions. So, they wanted to sign it. But the data isn't going to say that on their end of things, of course.
So tell me a little bit about what it was like to work with the Senate committee. I know that we work really well with a number of members on committee. Senator Warren has been especially a hard advocate for pharmacies in the TRICARE network, trying to really drill down into what's going on. So what was it like to, work with committee? How was that experience? What were some of the things that you may have been surprised about or enjoyed or disliked, like trying to get into this and seeing how all of it came together?
Yeah, no, it was really interesting. I'd never had the experience before, of course, and Senator Warren's office was great to work with. I had several, virtual meetings with them, preparing. I was surprised that the actual invitation to testify didn't arrive until only a week beforehand. They kept saying, it'll arrive, it'll show up eventually. But it was great. The Senate Armed Services uh, Committee informed me of a bunch of things in preparation for it, and overall that experience was great. But Warren has been an incredible advocate for independent pharmacy and for pharmacists, uh, you know, or patient choice,
Mhm.
and breaking up these uh, huge companies that control everything from the top to the bottom.
She does. She's been so active in that role, and it's been really wonderful on my end to work with her on a lot of that. I was really appreciative. She had asked if we would reach out to pharmacists and get some of their stories on how they were impacted. And we were able to get, I think she had almost 60 pharmacist stories that she was able to enter into the record on top of your own testimony, which I think is just so huge. And it gives voice to folks from, I think we had well over 25 states who wrote in with some stories, and it was really impactful. And so for everyone who wrote in, I think that it means something that their story got put in there, and then you were able to just give a little bit more color to everything that was happening. And so that was really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And so just kind of going into that a little bit, you have an Air Force base in your area, and you also had a really great patient story. And so can you talk a little bit about like how your patients were impacted when they left network and how you explained that to committee and like what you tried to get out there of just like how did this impact your patients and how was that impactful in explaining it to the committee?
I hope it was. I mean, at the end of the day, these are patients that are truly affected by the
Mhm.
policies that are made. And in my case, I had so many patients that I wish I could say every patient story up there. Jelaine and Lynn was one that I got to talk about. I have a really special relationship with Jelaine and worked with her for years, and she was always incredibly thankful and engaged in her husband's care. And and whenever this came up, whenever the contract was presented to me, she was the first person I thought of. Oh my gosh, I can't sign this. I hope Jolene's gonna be okay with it. And I remember telling her that we weren't gonna be able to be a part of the network, and she was gonna have to go through Express Scripts, mail order, or go on base. And she hasn't been. They haven't benefited from that change,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Which I think is, the biggest thing that as pharmacists, when talking to our members of Congress, we can say, hey, like, I'm a small business owner in your district. But it is not just me who is impacted by this. It is all of your patients. And specifically for this, it's all of your service members and their families, the people that we owe probably the most to. And you had such a great explanation of that and diving into it. How did you think it went back and forth with some of the questions you got or some of the other members got? I was pretty entertained. We got some fireworks yesterday, but how was it being on the dais and like hearing some of the other stories and getting to hear the questions that they got drilled down on?
Well, it was interesting to sit next to the CEO of Express Scripts. I tried to make some small talk with him before it started, and I don't know that he was excited about that. But I think some of the questions that the senators asked were really compelling, and really pushed them to reflect on if that
Mhm.
contract is being honored appropriately,
Yeah.
or if Express Scripts is kind of pushing it to their own advantage. And some of the senators came in, and I felt like threw some softball questions to the admiral and to the Express Scripts CEO. But overall, once we began the cadence of the conversation, I think was strong. I think we exposed enough concerns
Mhm.
that should be compelling to look into it further.
Yeah, I really hope so. At the previous hearing that they had, the head of DHA for all of this, and he had promised an audit, and we're trying to get that into legislative framework. We have it in the current National Defense Authorization Act as an amendment, hoping to get that pushed through into law later this year. But we do think that they're willing to do it, and I think maybe this helped give them direction on, these are the things we really need to look at. But it's so important because I think in some of the back and forth in the conversation, it came up that, ESI is getting admin fees on every prescription that they're dispensing. They get an incentive fee if they keep costs below X amount. We don't know what any of those numbers are. Meanwhile, we know, especially on generics, all of our folks are getting zero dispensing fee and barely, normally not getting reimbursed anywhere near cost of the drug, which is why you ended up having to leave. And so I think your testimony really hit. Senator King seemed very very interested in the fact that you were losing, or you would have lost potentially up to $9, I think it was, on your scripts if you'd have entered into the new contract, and that's just untenable.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so, taking from this experience and everything that you got from it, what are some of the recommendations that you would give other pharmacists who might be having some members come in? It's an election year, which means everyone's going to be home for a very long time this fall. And we're hoping to try and get a bunch of pharmacy visits going and trying to, get as much advocacy out there. Obviously, there's always going to be just general behind the counter, but especially when it's talking about how do we show what these contracts are doing to us and why we had to leave and who it's impacting? What would you recommend folks try to pull up to discuss with members if they can get them in their pharmacies?
You know, it's tough to simplify it again, and I think whenever you show them simple numbers, this is what this drug costs, this is what's paid. How can I improve my community by reinvesting in the equipment or the building or pay my staff? But how can I continue to support the needs of the community if there's not enough margin in here to even stay open in a lot of cases. And that's been true for a lot of pharmacies across the country, having to shut down because the margins are too thin.
Yeah.
So, I think it's good for communities to have strong presence with their local legislatures. But, if we have these opportunities to host a U.S. senator or representative, we need to take them. We need to have compelling um, data to show them.
Yeah. No, I think that's excellent. And also just like shout out on the state side, you're currently president of New Mexico Pharmacy, Board of Pharmacy,
For
right?
for about another month.
For another month. So you really have an inside, peek on how all of this has been going on as you have been going and doing all of this advocacy work over years at this point.
Mm,
But we were really just so grateful that you were able to come up and you did such an excellent job. So thank you for coming and talking with us on
of
this
course,
podcast, but
yes.
really thank you for representing independent pharmacists before Congress yesterday because that was hugely impactful. And I think you did a phenomenal job.
Thank you. So proud to have done it.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for listening to the Independent RX Forum. We will get back to you with another episode soon.